co-host for the next hour, John Hutchings, John H., who is also the owner of the Downtown Fitness Club at 50 Chestnut Street, and for nearly 20 years has been preaching the health and fitness gospel in and around the Rochester area. Good morning, John H. Are you ready for another episode of Fitness Edge Radio?
I'm always ready, Mike Danger. How you doing this morning?
Feeling excellent. Who are we talking to this morning?
We're up to our transformation episode, and we are talking to Kimberly Monnet of Greece, New York?
Chilai.
Chilai, okay. Down a little south of there. Chilai, New York. Kimberly, how are you doing? Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I'm doing great.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us this morning. Now, I want to tell a little bit of your backstory in terms of how I met you, became aware of your transformation that you completed, which is amazing. And then we'll do a little back and forth. You can kind of fill in the blanks with the background, how you got to there, and what your plans are for the future. How's that sound?
Sounds great.
All right, let's start. Now, I went to former Fitness Edge radio guest Jim Rockel's NPC Rochester Championships, about a month or so ago. We've had him on the show. We talked about it. And there I ran into Ralph Della Rocco. And he is a renowned trainer in the Rochester area. I think he trains primarily out of Atlas, doesn't he?
Yes.
Up there in Spencerport, right? And he said, "You've got to meet my client, Kimberly Monnet." And I said, "Oh, tell me about her." He said, "She is competing today." You competed in what division at that show?
I competed in physique.
Physique show. That's kind of a more muscular look than bikini, a little more muscular than figure?
Yes.
But not quite bodybuilding.
It's like a tone under bodybuilding.
Okay, so you competed in the physique contest, and I said, "Do tell me, Ralph, you have lost 83 pounds in preparation for that contest. You weighed over 200 pounds at one point, got down to about 120 pounds, hit the stage, very lean, very muscular, and there you go. You're the Transformation Tuesday story of the week from about a month ago, and I've chosen you as the Transformation Story of the Month. Congratulations."
Thank you very much.
Well, let's go back to the beginning, because as I do with all the Transformation Tuesday winners, I kind of chronicle their story, but I do it briefly because we do it on Facebook, and we lose people's attention real quick if we go over a few paragraphs. I still get a little wordy, but you were in a car accident back in December of 2011.
Yes.
And it was kind of an eye-opening experience. I mean, it was a pretty serious car accident. The car was totaled. You walked away without any major injuries, right?
Yes.
But more of like an epiphany as you were going through that process. You said, "What am I doing with my life?" You know, you're 5'4", we talked about that. You were tipping the scales at over 200 pounds.
Yes.
And we have your picture here, and we're looking at it. I mean, you look like a happy woman. You're attractive even at your heavier state, but, I mean, you were heavy, and you kind of thought about that and said, "What am I doing with my life in terms of the physical sense?" And that kind of set you on your course. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, after the accident, I just looked at everything, and I figured I wasn't happy with what was going on in my life. And I have two beautiful children at home that I want to be able to live for. And when I had some labs drawn, my triglycerides were high, I was pre-diabetic, and the whole accident just put everything into perspective. I wanted to live my life the way it should be lived.
So you were pre-diabetic, so you had a doctor probably saying, "Hey, you need to lose some weight, you need to change your diet, you need to exercise." Were all those thoughts going through your mind?
Yeah, I'm just like every person. You take the doctor's advice and goes in one ear and out the other.
Well, I'm sure you walk out of there with good intentions, but life happens, and you mentioned you have a couple of kids, so you have kids' activities, your schedule. You work 2 jobs, I believe.
Yes.
And we'll talk a little bit about that as we go on. Your husband, Nova, also works a couple of jobs, so you got some scheduling things. It's tough to fit in exercise. And then, Danger, you know this, you have kids, I have kids. The kids don't want to eat the healthy stuff that we're eating, so it's tough around mealtime. So you had some challenges, and like all of us at various times, you had legitimate excuses, I'll put air quotes out there, why you weren't able to do that. But this accident kind of set the wheels in motion. What's the next thing you do? You make the decision, I want to make a change. How do you start?
Well, I started with my husband. He's always been into bodybuilding and lifting weights. And he's the one who told me, well, if you want to lose weight, the best way to do it is weight training. So I started doing that, and it just started the ball rolling. He taught me how to exercise, he taught me how to eat, and I lost about 60 pounds all on my own. that
Okay,
way.
so, give an example. First of all, for the women listeners out there on Fitness Edge Radio, weight training, I think more and more people are starting to realize the value of it in terms of weight loss and sculpting the body that they want to. But, common knowledge or conventional wisdom up to this point was you did a lot of cardio. You cut your fat out. You bought everything that said fat free, but it was loaded with sugar or calories from carbohydrates. So, it was kind of some misinformation out there. You were fortunate that your husband was already into that lifestyle.
Yes, definitely.
Now, up to that car accident, when you made the decision, was it just kind of annoying to live with a guy who was always eating healthy and you weren't?
Yeah, we were always into arguments. He'd spend 2-3 hours at the gym. I'd be like, "What are you doing in there?" He's like, "That's what I do. That's what I love." And I really didn't find that love until I became part of that. And then I was getting yelled at, "What are you doing at the gym?" I'd be like, "I'm working out."
So the tables were turned a little bit. Danger, I don't know if you want to chime in on this, but as a husband, it's very difficult to tell your wife, hey, maybe you should be eating healthier. I mean, did you guys ever have any discussions prior to you deciding to lose weight where Nova might have said, should you eat that other bowl of ice cream tonight? I mean, did he get under your
There's
skin that
never
way?
a good time to say that.
Yeah,
You can't say that.
You cannot. You're not allowed. But yet, I'm sure his motivation was right. The technique was probably poor. Tell us a little bit about some of those conversations.
He actually was very nice about it. He would always tell me, because my parents have some health issues.
Okay.
And he would always tell me, "Honey, look at your parents. Do you really want to go through that? You should really start coming to the gym with me. I'm not saying you're fat. I just think you should do it for your health. Genetics are a big thing." Like he would always say it's a health issue.
He sounds like a very intelligent man. He approached that very diplomatically.
He definitely didn't get a slap in the face, so.
You strike me as a person, if he deserved it, you would definitely give a slap in the face.
Most likely.
Talking with Kimberly Monnet. She's our Body Transformation of the Month on Fitness Edge Radio, Sports Radio, 950 ESPN, now on the FM dial as well, ESPN Rochester, 95.7 FM. This is Fitness Edge Radio. I'm Mike Danger. John H. is your host.
So let's talk about you started. Where do you start lifting weights? How sore are you at the beginning? I mean, is Nova a qualified trainer who eases you into something, or does he take you in and you start doing his workouts? And tell us how you felt if that was the case.
Well, the way it started is the first week he came with me, because obviously there's babysitting issues. So the first week he came with me and taught me a routine, taught me how to work out, taught me pay attention to details when you are working out, pay attention to your posture and things like that. And then after that, I had to go on my own. But I can tell you, I was pretty sore that week for about 2 weeks. I could barely walk.
Yeah, I mean, those first few workouts, I always say the hardest workouts are like the second and third workouts, because the first one, you don't know what you don't know. So you just go in and you do whatever you see other people doing or what the person with you is telling you. But then the soreness sets in. And the reality is you're not in any better shape. You didn't make any progress from your first workout. You probably can speak to that, to people who are looking for quick results. It doesn't come that quickly, although you experience pretty good results pretty steadily off the get-go. So, 2 weeks you're sore. Are you thinking about quitting at that point?
I did think about quitting a few times, but then I kept looking back and looking at the accident and just kept telling myself, this is for myself. This is something I have to do. I've put my priorities, my life aside for my children. Now it's time for me. And I just kept telling myself that.
Now, what was the closest you came to just saying, my life ain't that bad? Like I said, you're a cute woman here at 200 pounds. I mean, got some go-go boots on in that picture. I mean, you could be happy and live your life that way, right? I mean, at what point did you get closest to going back and saying, it's not worth it?
I never got to that point where I was like, I just don't want to do this anymore. But there were times where, I'd sit down with a bowl of ice cream and said, you know what, I'm going to have this treat right now. I deserve it. But I've never actually said, I'm done with this. Because I knew I wanted to do something better for myself. Like, I used to love shopping, and at the point when I was over 200 pounds, I didn't want to go shopping. I didn't want to go to the mall. If I went shopping, it was always for my kids or for my husband. I was always walking around in old clothes because I was like, what's the point?
Yeah, right.
And
Yeah, it's tough to find that mentality where you're selfishly making time for yourself as a mom, right?
Mhm. And after the accident, I realized I was depressed. That is a sign of depression. You know, there were things I liked to do that I stopped doing just because of my weight and my insecurities.
Okay, so you had that factor figured in as well.
Yes.
When did you turn the corner? Was it early on where you said, hey, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do it to the best of my ability in terms of shaping your body, losing the weight? Tell us about some of those early decisions and some of the early goals you set for yourself.
Well, I always started small. I gave myself 2 weeks to lose 5 pounds. That was always my goal, small steps. Just because if I gave myself an outrageous goal, I know I would end up coming back and just falling behind. I just say, you know, set small goals, and that's easier to reach, and that's what helped me through working out and just staying with it.
Excellent. Small, bite-sized goals,
Mhm.
realistic goals that you can achieve, build confidence through, and then just get the strength to go on to the next thing, right?
Yes.
Step by step.
Mhm.
At what point, now you get going, at what point do you meet Ralph? How does Ralph come into the picture? Because Ralph's a great trainer, and were you guys training at Atlas at that point, or were you someplace else? Tell us about how that meeting occurred.
Actually, as a woman, we get all these nasty fat pockets that are hard to get rid of. And I was talking to my husband about it, and he said, you should do a bodybuilding show. I was like, what are you talking about? I'm not into bodybuilding. I don't want to stand in front of people in a bikini. And he's like, but you're still unhappy with your body. You should really think about it. So I started doing my research, and I started looking at like the Miss Olympia past shows and a lot of the other shows on YouTube. And I was like, that's what I want to look like. And I just started asking around, and I find one day I was at a Zumba class actually, and one of the girls that does Zumba with me says, I'm actually thinking of competing in bikini. And I have my brother's brother
Okay?
actually did a competition with Ralph.
Okay. So there was kind of a Kevin Bacon type syndrome, like 7 degrees of separation through a brother of a brother trained with Ralph. You were introduced to Ralph.
Yes.
Okay, cool. You want to go to break, Danger?
Yeah, we got Kimberly Monnet in studio with us. It's Fitness Edge Radio on ESPN Rochester. We're learning about her amazing transformation story, and we want to find out a little bit more about how she performed on that stage.
Absolutely.
Let's do that next on Fitness Edge Radio.
Boom. All right, so when we come back, we'll talk about Ralph and your experience with him. I want to kind of speak to the female audience. Maybe we have a few, I don't know. About the obstacles, you know, the child care,
Mhm.
the working the 2 jobs. You know, I don't want to portray you guys as like, you know, working nonstop, but, you know, there were some challenges there.
Mhm.
So, if you could talk to the people who are experiencing those same things, because I'm sure at some point, like I just experienced today, my wife called me. She said, here's the situation. This kid's got to be here. This kid's got to be here. This kid's got football. This kid's got, and we got these cars, and it was like a Rubik's Cube. And I said, well, the solution is don't bring Alex to work, because Alex was supposed to work at the gym today. I said, well, okay, let me rethink that. He comes to work. He drives me over to the studio. I'm going to walk back. I said, this will be real good. I'm going to say to the last guest today, hey, you mind giving me a ride afterwards? Or I'm going to walk back.
They're actually in the lobby.
Are
so,
they?
Yeah.
So, you know, we want to talk about just that kind of mental stress that goes on with trying to just constantly, it feels like you're solving another problem. All right?
Yep.
And then we'll talk about the fundraiser and kind of some of the flack that we got